Bueno, pues nada, buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Ahora, pues como hemos hecho nosotros las cosas en Navarra.
We are going to present what we've done in Navarra in public pools. And we actually dove head in when they told us to work on this. And there weren't that many experiences in Spain. And I would like to start off by thanking the organizers, and especially Juanma, for inviting us and for all the support that they have given us, not just to be here today, but also for their support to include these certificates in our program. I want to start with some news that you can read on the newspaper El Confidencial. There are some colleagues in the region of Andalucía who have been studying this for quite a while, and they have reported that there's many people who slip in pools. They have conducted studies on wet surfaces, and and they praise the work that we have done in Navarra because we have been the first ones to introduce the criteria, and they have put together an infographic showing accidents by slipping across the Spanish territory. And as you know, there's regions that have more pools than others, so this has an impact on this map. I'm not going to elaborate on this because it has already been mentioned, but because we work in the health sector, we always have our eyes on the WHO. And it's very important that we mention the definition of falls, which is an event that causes the person to fall on the floor unexpectedly and involuntarily. And this is something that is very important. There's very few epidemiological studies. As you know, epidemiological studies try and determine the causes of events, and health entities are not really focusing on this. So it's a point that we must sleep on, actually. And of course, there is a lot of need to increase education, train people, which is something that we have tried to foster in Navarra so that we can have policies issued by health entities and other entities that will help us establish programs to control risks and safety. What was the situation in Navarra before starting working on this issue? In regulation, there was a concept included which was anti-slippery surface, and it was an absolute concept. It was, is it slippery or not? It's black or white. And as you know, life doesn't work that way, so it's very arbitrary. Sometimes it was considered to be a rough type of surface, but that's no guarantee for safety. And there were many problems in facilities. And there are some problems also with competences, because some people say that in the health department we shouldn't put our nose into this because this really has to do with safety rather than other things. But if it's not managed in control programs for public usage pools, if we don't manage it from that standpoint, it's very difficult that it will be managed from any other point. And I must highlight that when technicians and architects were specifying the requirements for pools, they came to us and asked, how do I report slipperiness? I mean, do I set the foot on the floor and do I say whether I consider it slippery or not? And this was 2003, and I mean, almost everything could be measured by then. Perhaps we didn't agree on the methods, but you should have been able to measure things back then. So this fostered us to of course, look for standards, and we tried to get a lot of advice. We received a lot of support from Juanma, and given that there was no European standard, because right now there's no directive for pools or any other type of regulation that we could use as reference. So we did what we normally do in Spain. If there's nothing here, we set our eyes on Germany or the UK, and there we found some methods that could help us determine the measurements that we we were looking for. And this helped us justify our actions, because when we created the pool program, we always said, of course, there's microbiological risks, air quality, water quality, mix of chemical products, but also there's safety risks. There's drowning, and we have lifeguards. We have lifeguards for that. And of course, we also talked about safety at pools specifically, and this had to do with other aspects that had to be factored in. So we, of course, started giving more and more importance to anti-slipperiness. Now, if you review the national regulation, which is something that establishes a minimum level for all regions, you see that it already talks about health, that is air quality and water quality. It doesn't even talk about lifeguards, because that's left in the hands of the regions. But in our regional standards, we've also said that there is, of course, health requirements, but also safety requirements, because pools mustn't pose a threat to the safety of users. And things have changed a little bit with the technical code, because now we're included in scenario 742 that establishes the basic scenario for all pools in Spain. And now there is a royal decree, so nobody can avoid following this rule. Now, other countries have also regulated this. They established a series of anti-slipperiness measurements. In the UK, they also have a building code that has been reformed that establishes that safety must be guaranteed, and there's some basic criteria at the EU level that, of course, must be transposed also at the regional level. And what did we find back then? Well, there were risks. There was no European consensus as to how to measure or on standards. The definition was very complex and sometimes was considered to be a bit subjective, but the industry was working to have methods, guidelines and standards, and we know that this is a concept that really depends on variables, cleanliness or being barefoot or not, and we received a lot of advice from labs, and we ended up considering that we had to require anti-slipperiness certificates from our pools. And now that we have a code, the scenario has changed much more. Here you see the evolution of the standard. There was an order of the 1960s that was in place until 1997 was issued, and it did talk about having rough surfaces to avoid slipping, but then in 2003 this criteria were introduced in our pool regulations, and in the last regional decree on pools we pick up on these standards too. I am not going to talk about this because you all know what din and tortoise are, and by the way, the equivalent method is always introduced in the regulations in case just someone finds something that is equivalent, but it's really difficult to do. The din and tortoise standards and the scales, and well, this is the scenario that we had before. So where do we have to have this? At the basin, the dressing rooms, stairs with class G or other areas where you would also be wearing footwear even. And things have changed a little bit with the building code and with the new building code, and this is the way tests are performed now. It's perhaps a bit more difficult to certify that the anti-slipperiness condition will be maintained throughout the useful life of the pavement, and we're trying to find a way to go about it. You know the classes, you know how to perform the measurements. Here we have the comparison, the situation before the technical code, what we want to have now based on the new code. This is the regional decree. You can count the word anti-slippery to see how many times this appears in our code. And you will see that this is a very important term. And there's other safety methods with other types of measurement methods too. But at the end of the day, it's established that it is important to measure this. So we came up with a pulse surveillance program that is approved by the Institute's executive manager every year. And in March, we prepare the program. We arrange for training sessions so that people can be acquainted with the requirements and with the new requirements too. And they need to report what we call a responsible declaration of functioning. And in June, they need to have their certificates issued. And we have an IT tool where they can input their control data so that we can double-check them at the administration. And then from June to September, there are inspections that are being undertaken. 2 technicians are here with me today, but there's 8 of us. We don't just inspect pools, we inspect many other things, but we do, of course, pay the necessary visits to the facilities. And we also have an ongoing collaboration program with the regional police, and we have trained them so that they can verify things such as the anti-slipperiness certificate, and they help us in with this checks. Otherwise, we wouldn't make it. And at the end of the season, we wrap up the project. And by the way, this is for summer pools. If these are pools that are open throughout the year, the program would continue throughout the winter too. And in our case, this has been applied to 273 facilities and 644 basins. If we extended this to Spain, we would be talking about 40,000 facilities, sports facilities with pools. And, well, this is very important in terms of the type of market that needs to be covered. What are the requirements? Well, they need to present anti-slippery certificates from labs that work on pavements in the different areas that we mentioned. And what we do is to ask for these certificates on each surface, material and color. Every 5 seasons, they need to renew them. They do on-site measurements on already placed pavements. And we don't just validate the manufacturer's certificates. We want to perform on-site tests. And this is something that is applicable to owners of the pools, which are companies or individuals. Or if it's done through a management company, then the application would fall in the hands of the management company. Now, this is the model that they sign off. This is the document that they sign off before the season starts, saying that they comply with the anti-slippery requirements established in the regulations in place. And this is has a lot of legal value, a very high legal value. And we present the program. We insist on anti-slipperiness treatments, and we talk about pavements. And by the way, this information is all available in our website. We tell them how to perform measurements in the different types of pavements, if colors change, if the types change, and when a certificate could be applicable or not. If it's the same pavement placed in different areas, that certificate could be used, but in the certificate they need to specify in what areas they have performed measurements and where is that safe pavement placed, and if possible, they would also attach pictures of the measurements. And here there is a scale that is aligned with the pendulum, and it establishes that with the levels required, the possibility of someone slipping goes down to 1 in 1 million.
Juan, if I said something that was incorrect, please let me know. Exactly. Yes, come and control if we're saying something wrong. So we also give a series of advice. Juanma has collaborated a lot with us with regards to cleaning procedures. As you know, we have to take into account the fact that sometimes we have to polish it. We treat with products or increase roughness, or in some cases we have to substitute the pavement as well. So on the website, we tell them what to ask for. We explain what are the measuring systems. So Right now, this one is what we uploaded for the previous season. Now we have to upload the 2020 program. So previously, the one for 2003 was valid because some had valid certificates, but now with Tortoise, we have changed that. So we really explained that the results in the pendulum cannot be compared. And then we have as well a problem that we have detected with plastic pavements that sometimes remain in Class B, and there is a complementary document for the code that says that we will consider that Class B pavements are also considered safe, but we decided to only ask DIN for plastic pavements with something else that I'm going to be mentioning here, because the problem that, well, I'm sure that you are, since you're experts, you know it, but this has to be done in the lab. So when they place a plastic pavement, we tell them, well, the laboratory can certify that it's Class B, but every 5 years you will have to certify it. So you will have to rip part of the pavement. How are you going to do it? So we reached the conclusion that if they show B, then they also have to do the pendulum. And if after 5 years there is lots of difference and there is a lack of conditions, then more probably they will have to change the pavement. So we would have a table such as this one, which is what we have on our website. And the ones that are newly installed, we have to be responsible after the construction, and they have to present the certificates. But more specifically with regards to the pavement that is going to be installed, because we also had problems with that, because we won't consider valid certificates from manufacturers. Now, on the website, we also have the companies. It's an open list. Anyone can ask to be a part of this list, because usually they told us that all of these measures and treatments could be carried out, and they wanted to know who could do it. And I always want to highlight the importance of collaboration between all of us. I always say it during all of the talks that I give. I think that this is how we learn, and it has been mentioned in other presentations. We need to collaborate, because if we all follow our own path, then in the end these programs will be very difficult to apply or even impossible to apply. And I also wanted to talk about some funny things that have happened. For instance, here we had different colors with different values. So from now onwards, if the color changes, there is a different certificate. A very, very tense meeting with manufacturers. This is a new construction pool. They sent the certificates. It was open. People started using it, especially the not deep swimming pool, and everyone felt what happens here. So we decided to do some on-site measurements, and you can obviously imagine that there was no similarities between the certificates and the reality. It was a very tense meeting. The manufacturers said, oh, no one is going to believe in what we say. And in Navarra, we always ask for on-site measurements of the pavement and the whole area, which is also a place where we have had problems. We also had problems in the other way. These facilities that are very trendy with water attractions, we asked for certificates as well. With these pavements that are very nice, that look like stone, but then you have to walk around the area while barefoot. So users started complaining, saying that their feet had endured lots of different scratches, and claims were filed. So we saw that the degree was very high, and we measured the different areas. Some areas had 87, almost 90. So 94, we applied some wearing. We wore it down to 60-something, but still we thought that it could be reduced. And in the end, we used a product that would enter the pore and made the surface more friendly, and we reached 66, and that's where the complaints of users would stop. So I just wanted to tell you that we should have a maximum, not just a minimum. And here you can see that in order to leave the swimming pool very nice and shiny, after doing the measurements, they polished it so that it would shine before filling it with water. So everything that you had done, well, you visited and say, well, this is not what we approved. It's true that now they have training, now they understand what it is that we expect from them, but these are things that have happened and they don't even think about it until you don't stop them and tell them, what are you doing? Do you realize what it is that you're doing? Or in this pool, this was in the press, as you can see. It's very important to do an in-depth cleaning before filling up the pools. We use all sorts of cleaning products because of all of the dirt that remains during the whole season. Obviously, we have a way of using the products, but we don't usually read the labels. And it said that afterwards you had to really use water, but they didn't do it. They let it dry, and there was a whole layer of product. And obviously, the kids suffered from injuries in the feet, so they had to use acid products in order to get that product out of the pool. We also have to say that the health ministry forces us to inform of all the incidents in swimming pools, and sometimes they're not serious incidents, but sometimes there are falls and injuries. So if there is any accident, we have to inform of it, and we also have to adopt the measures needed. We need to take a look at the situation, if there had been some problem or if something could have been done to prevent the accident. Then we have judges. I have members of my family are lawyers, and I like to read the sentences. And sometimes they say, "No, you should have known that there was water. You were in a swimming pool. If you fell, you fell, and there's no responsibility." Another said, "No, you couldn't really have those mats there, and you couldn't force people to use flip-flops or to get dry before you get out of the system." You know that there is too much independence among judges in our country, but we also need to know that there needs to be a responsibility in facilities. If these are public facilities and there is a bad functioning, then administration must always pay if the way in which the premises function was not correct. And sometimes these sanctions can be very, very important, and this makes them think. So the better my premises are, the better I will defend myself in the cases such as the ones that we are seeing here. There are even some companies that give legal advice. If you have had an accident, you can file a claim. So we can have different criteria amongst the judges. If the judge considers that it was your fault, that you were not responsible enough because you didn't look at the steps or you were distracted. But sometimes we do have cases where the judge says the handrail was not well put, or everything was polluted and you did not see it. So, and then there are other situations where users, we used to be part of the Ministry of Health, but we like to see what the consumers think, the users think. And sometimes you read news where they are complaining through the National Federation of Users and Consumers. They say that there are too many slips in swimming pools, that not much has been done so that they're not so slippery, and that many swimming pools still have some slippery areas. So they are telling us, the users are telling us, that the situation has to change, and entities such as ours needs to create programs so that we can prevent these risks. And if they are telling us, if users and consumers are telling us this and we work for them, then we need to think about the situation. And we also have colleagues such as these colleagues from Andalusia that I started with, that I want to end with my presentation, who do some specific studies in swimming pools, and they tell us that the risk of slipping is one of the main risks that we face. But I know that then judges will decide what responsibility there is. And the accreditation with a standard with some minimum safety is important, and it's something that we all need to have, and we need to prove that we are fulfilling that. And it is one of the main reasons for injuries in these activities. And this is the second cause for accidents, in the surfaces that are not anti-slipping surfaces, or because of a bad maintenance that can lead us to the same situation. So, in order to finish, I wanted to just assess how we see it at the Public Health Institute. We think that it is very important for us to consider safety risks, and that is what we're doing. we have people filing claims, and we have here some examples, and we need to give an answer to those claims, and we need to do it in the best way possible. And I also wanted to show how important it is to have on-site measures of laboratories that are accredited. We, due to other reasons, with regards to water and other problems, we usually like for laboratories to be credited because it gives you an added guarantee, and some people might not agree, but these are measures that need to take place. It's not just with pavements. I mean, it's with pavements that are installed. Yes, I know that manufacturers do their tests in their labs, but in your lab you can do it much better. That has also happened to us with disinfectants, for instance. When we evaluate disinfectants, the way in which I put the bacteria so that the disinfectant acts is different in the lab than on site. If you do it on site, you see that the reactions are different. So on-site measures are important, I believe. I also think that it is important during all of this day's work, when we present the program, sometimes we even have the media present. We do a session. We usually ask all the newspapers to come. When there are new companies, we also remind them of some of the new requirements or the old requirements, and we usually talk about microbiology, slipperiness, and so on. And I think that we have a great staff in our pools that is very well trained. So we have to create this philosophy of abiding by the law, because we will all have a greater peace of mind if we fulfill everything that is expected of us. I don't know if you know how the inspector of Andalusia has been judged with the listeria problem. You are very much at ease until you stop being at ease. For 3 years, she did not go to the factory, and then the judge said, well, come here and tell me about this. So this philosophy, this compliance philosophy, is something that makes us all feel better. But we also see aspects in the code, and maybe it's not for us to say, but that could be improved, such as those doubts that some pavement generate, or those support documents where we talk about the fact that a Class B can be safe. And when manufacturers tell us, have you read this? And you're going to ask me for Class C and not plastic, and so on. We also have to introduce a maximum due to the reasons that I just gave, the problems that I gave you. We know that 55, 60 people start complaining, and also how to explain that there is not a loss of properties. How do we do this study showing that there isn't a loss of properties, that they're still there during the useful life of product? We are asking as a minimum that they have to do it every 5 years, but if they detect problems, they have to have their own self-control and vigilance protocols. They need to know what areas in their facilities are critical. If they detect a problem, they will have to carry out more measures. And if we do this every 5 years, if it is good, if we should do more, if we should do less, how pavements lose their properties, it is a difficult topic, as we all know. I would also highlight the collaboration of the sector that has always given us their support in all of our actions. And I also wanted to remind you that this is to be applied all over Spain. Although some people say that anti-slipperiness in pools is not to be applied all over Spain, but we have a code. You know that Spain is one of the countries that legislates most, but that doesn't really fulfill what it has been legislated. And we have also done this in other places. We come from Pamplona. We don't want our pools to slip, then we don't want our people to slip in pools either. And this is everything that I wanted to tell you. And if you have any doubts, please do not hesitate to ask your questions. Thank you very much.